All right, here we are, Kinesiology 230. This is chapter 18. This chapter is specific to clients who are pre-adolescent, older, or pregnant. This is presentation number 1, and we'll be talking about pre-adolescent clients. I have to tell you that the content in this chapter is not particularly robust per se. By that I mean it's not as though that there are a lot of quiz questions and test questions that you see down the road based off of these chapters, but still they have their place and there are a couple areas that we should focus. So let's go ahead and jump on in. So pre-adolescence, it's a time of development that's before secondary sex characteristics and corresponds to ages roughly, it depends, girls 6 to 11 years old and boys 6 to 13 years old. And the book notes that regular activity is encouraged, and they talk about moderate to vigorous physical activity, and that's going to be denoted going forward as MVPA. And it's a matter of how you actually put together your programming for your clients to be able to incorporate in those moderately vigorous physical activities. But the MVPAs themselves, they're kind of crucial to the taxing of the right energy systems in the human body for kids. But kids themselves tend to have a little bit different movement patterns than adults, and that's why the MVPAs kind of have their place. But it becomes very much like discontinuous exercise. And the part that they note here, if we kind of get down here, furthermore, increasing opportunities for regular to moderate vigorous physical activity may support academic achievement and favorably influence brain structure and function in youth. And I can tell you that there were many times, like when I have 2 stepsons, and my 2 stepsons were growing up, we would do homework for a half an hour and I'd let them run around for 10 minutes. We would do homework for a half an hour, let them run around for 10 minutes. And that was kind of the routine, because it certainly helped them remain on task during the homework time, and anything beyond a half an hour was just too much for them. But it ends up being a matter of like that moderate activity was great. It was a perfect balance. And they talk about how children are intermittently active and they have random bursts of energy, and they kind of haphazardly increase and decrease exercise intensity. And it's really, I think, a misnomer to say exercise intensity, because really what it is it's just activity. Running around, playing games, playing different sports with their friends. So it's not so much it's like true exercise activity that's haphazard. It's really just movement on a playground. And the book goes into kind of high intensity interval training, or HIIT, would be a better fit for children as opposed to just 30 minutes continuous exercise. And I would even say that to a certain degree, formalized HIIT training would be a little bit outside of the scope for this group, just for a simple fact of how kids would rather be involved in gameplay and run around and have fun. So you might set up like certain gameplay activities in a circuit to be able to achieve HIIT, but I wouldn't call it HIIT style training to a bunch of kids. It just wouldn't work out. So they talk about some of the basic physiological differences, and I think these are pretty darn self-evident, but they talk about how the physiological differences between adults and children play into programming. So, healthy children will breathe rapidly during the fitness workout, go figure. Children have lower stroke volume and higher heart rate, basically just because they have smaller hearts. Maximal heart rates do not change much during childhood. It's not uncommon for a child's heart rate to exceed 200 beats. And that's, I think, just pretty self-evident in terms of the actual stroke volume is lower, so the heart rate has to beat more beats per minute to be able to keep up with the volume needed to service all the muscles. And maximal heart rate prediction equations developed for adults may have limited accuracy in children. I think that's pretty self-evident as well. And they talk about, with qualified instruction and enthusiastic leadership, that's where you guys come in as coaches. You have to have an eye to safety, and to that end, children can still have a great workout experience. It's just how you bundle it up and package it to the children. And if it becomes a workout experience or more of a game-like experience, then it becomes more enjoyable for them, and they have a greater likelihood of it being something that they'll actually stick to. And with resistance training, totally fine for kids to be able to do it, totally fine for pre-adolescents to be more specific to be able to do it. But you have to have some limitations within the programming. The risk that used to be the big risk that everybody talked about was, oh, we don't want to damage the epithelial plate um, and stunt growth. And both of those are nonsense and are really unfounded at this point. But it comes down to safe supervision, and you want to have the right sized equipment if you use selectorized equipment, and you want to have just safe equipment that's in good working order when you're working with your youth athletes. So it's not really a concern, but I would also stress this, and I think I noticed this in a different slide. If you have an athlete who's participating in a sport and they're running and jumping and they're falling on the ground and getting back up, they're doing some resistance style training per se in the context of their activity. They're doing some plyometric style training in the context of the activity itself. So to a certain degree, I think it's silly to say by putting a bar or dumbbells in a child's hands, you're going to cause some kind of catastrophic injury that is just not even recognized in the sporting endeavor. I think it's nonsense. So we know kids can achieve strength gains, and we know that it comes from just various combinations of reps and sets, but you have to be smart about how you do this. And it comes down to a little bit of the neural adaptations that are seen from strength training. And this kind of makes sense when you think about it, because we talked previously about how when a client starts a workout program and they begin the workout program, the gains that they have on the front end have less to do with hypertrophy and getting stronger from packing on tons of muscle. It actually comes from being better coordinated and having a better systematic method of firing the correct muscles to push more weights around. I would also just kind of point out that when you work with children who are pre-adolescent, you have they're going through a pretty steep growth curve, and as a result, they really are not the same person today as they were yesterday as they will be tomorrow, because they're growing so fast. And the end of this is they just don't have the chemicals in the body to get massively huge, right? Or the hormones in the body get massively huge. But what you can do is reinforce fundamental and foundational movement patterns to help them continually have touchstones as they go through a growth curve. I can't tell you how many times I taught speed agility with young athletes, and I mentioned it before in another week of lectures, but I'd leave the student on a Thursday, or leave the athlete on a Friday or a Thursday, and that athlete would come back on like Monday after having a growth spurt over the weekend. It's like we had to relearn everything. So, it comes down to making sure you have like the foundational stuff in place, and then just kind of build on that over and over and over again with your athletes. Now, the other part of this is strength training is of benefit because of bone mineral density, motor performance skills, weight control, cardiometabolic health, and mental health. So they all have these different benefits. Weight training has all these different benefits associated with it. But I would say, yet again, it depends how you map it out for your person. If you are teaching it in a way where it's fun, it's energetic, and they're learning new skills, and we're constantly challenging them to try different things, then it becomes a different story. But if it's like we're just there to pound out heavy weights and doing our rep and set, and that's all it's about, then it's a different story, and you'll lose your athletes. So to a certain degree, even though these are all benefits, I would contest that these are all benefits at the end of a well thought out and well constructed program. And this part of it with the overweight, they can benefit in terms of becoming stronger per se, and perhaps there is some validity to this because of the discontinuous nature of strength training, that overweight children prefer strength training. And also perhaps we know that because of somatotype related to strength, the more the body mass, or more body mass the person has, the more weight they can push around. So there's a little bit of an ego thing there as well. So perhaps athletes are seeing success in pushing weights around because of their somatotype. They don't really differentiate that in the book. Children who participate in sports, they are placing loads on their body, as I noted earlier. And with this, resistance training can help to make their body stronger and more powerful, which is usually a requirement of any sporting activity. And this reduces the possibility of injury and increases participation adherence. If you think about this in terms of replacing a stressor on a human organism. We know muscles, tendons, ligaments, bones all get stronger inherently different rates. And we have athletes that are getting stronger, and then they go out and to play a game or a sport, and they're stronger on the field. They will be less likely to have an injury. And but oftentimes, youth athletes don't really prepare for the particular sport. And this kind of is a double edge here, because we talk about lack of specificity, or how specificity can be detrimental to young athletes, but there has to be some type of preparation leading into a particular sport. So there's a bit of a challenge you have here to ride a line between, are we getting too specific and making it more like a professionalism type of mindset for athletics, or are we actually preparing our athletes for the upcoming season? So there's a balance in there, and they kind of cite this, and they get into it a little bit in here when they talk about to better prepare. You want to have children who have been inactive for 2 to 3 months should be encouraged to participate in an integrated program. Now, I will say this. They differentiate here by saying no physical activities or sport. So if you have somebody who's a multi-sport athlete, perhaps they'll be better prepared going in than somebody who sat around for 2 to 3 months. They note that participants should have the maturity to accept directions. Primal movement patterns using body weight are better suited for younger participants. Moderate weight of less than 60% of 1 rep max, which is such a moving target at that age anyways, it doesn't really matter. For 1 to 2 sets at 8 to 12 repetitions is appropriate for beginners. And it's something that is a learned skill, and I said it earlier, they have to be able to have skill competency, and part of this process when you're working with youth athletes is the skill competency is ever evolving, because again, you'll have a student or an athlete that'll go home, and the athlete will go home, they'll come back 3 days later and be 1.5 inches taller, and you have to relearn everything. So they're no longer competent per se in that skill, but you just have to reteach it. This is on 497. It's going to be seen somewhere else. One of the bullet points they have here is begin with 1 to 2 sets of 8 to 12 reps of a variety of exercises, and then you can progress to heavier loads of more complex exercises in their programs thereafter. But that highlighted part is what you're going to see later on. Now, be sure to incorporate some fun into the process for children. It can't be like just 3 sets of 10. You sit around bored in between where you're looking at your stopwatch. You got to have some kind of process. You got to have some way to kind of engage them in the process, as opposed to being outcome oriented. We're not worried about their actual 1 rep max and testing out, but it's more about just working out and having fun and being fit. They provide these good suggestions in here, and I think you want to take a moment to pause here and just kind of read this paragraph, and I think you're going to find it to be a benefit. But if you're going to coach athletes, again, make it fun, make it process oriented. And when you have this, you can kind of pause this one as well, and it makes sense. You want to speak to words they understand. You're not going to talk anatomical terms. Greet the child, engage with the child, use their name, praise them for good stuff. You may have to offer cueing, but it's got to be a positive, negative, positive mindset. And to a certain degree, you have to keep the parents in the loop. So maybe pause that and do a little review of those bullet points. So with that, guys, with adolescence, it's a lot of stuff that I've already talked about in previous examples, in previous lectures. But it goes without saying, when you're talking about pre-adolescence and you're talking about working with them, you need to make it fun, you need to make it process-oriented, and you need to have little victories in there for them along the way. All right, moving on to the next presentation.